I go away for a weekend and the whole place burns down. We're going to talk about the second apron. We're going to talk about why KCP's gone. We're going to try and explain what's happening, whether we like it or not. And I'm going to try and give you some optimism for where this team goes from here. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day, being with us Monday through Friday. We appreciate you guys supporting the show. If you can, head on over to youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets. Give us a like and subscribe there. If you're listening on the podcast, hey, open up that app and give us a 5-star review. Let us know that you appreciate the show because we try so hard to give you guys great content all week long here on Locked On Nuggets. Today's show is Swipe and Gripe. I'm Matt Moore, the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I'm joined by Swipa. He's Swipa Cam on Twitter and on YouTube. You can catch his work at Bleacher Report. You can catch his work all over the internet. Just follow him on Twitter at Swipa Cam. No, I will not use X. It's still going to be Twitter to me until the day I die. You can find him on YouTube as well. We're going to talk about all things Nuggets today. We're going to talk about, I'm going to try and explain my position since it's been a rough week on the old Twitters in terms of where Nuggets fans are at, and I understand that. I'm going to try and clarify some things, and we're going to get Swiper's perspective on it as well. I want to let you know today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs have winded down the NBA, but the WNBA is going strong. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Okay. Swipa, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing well. I don't know, Matt, you have great. We got a frozen Matt over here. The fact that his beard has grown back so quickly already is incredulous. And there he goes. But yeah, man, this has been a very interesting time. I think if you're a Denver Nuggets fan, there's a lot of different stuff happening right now. The CBA trying to figure out what exactly is going on, trying to figure out what the Denver Nuggets are doing, trying to figure out where do things go from here. And I'm not going to lie, the timeline, Twitter, YouTube, the comments and all the videos has been very, 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 very down on where the Nuggets are right now. And again, understandably, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he leaves for a 3-year, $66 million deal. 3-year, $66 million deal with the Orlando Magic. And here comes the man with the beard himself. So my personal feelings about this are the CBA is a new process. It's a difficult process to navigate. The Nuggets have the best player in the world, and they have a duty to get better around him. But because of the new restrictions with the CBA, there are some things that are withholding their opportunity to do that, maybe in some ways they would have done previously. But either way, I personally feel they got to get better. There's some decisions that they have to make. There's some additions they have to make to the roster that would make them better overall. I understand that they're limited in their cap situation, but I mean, right now, going into the year with Jamal Murray and Jalen Pickett, bunch of third-year, second-year rookie contracts on the roster. It doesn't seem viable for winning another championship right now.
It's very funny to me that as I try and explain these, as much like the Nuggets offseason, I got short-circuited right as I started to get started. So D. Hume says this: if not now for the second apron, when? Now is the time. Can we at least start pointing out the specific things in the second apron that are non-negotiable? They rarely sign buyouts or trade. Let's start right here. I would just want to clarify this because I've gotten a lot of these comments. Well, they're just cheap. They're just cheap. I have covered this team for 13 years. And every time that they have cheapened out, which has been a lot, I have called them to task for it. I have talked about the practice facility. I've talked about their unwillingness to pay coaches. I've talked about their unwillingness to upgrade facilities. I've talked about their unwillingness to pay front office staff. I've talked about these things over and over and over and over again. So I am not going to sit here and be talked about as if I'm a water carrier for the organization. But the recurring theme for the Denver Nuggets under Kroenke has been this: they will pay for players because they believe that is the premium product, and that is all that matters. That if you put good players on the floor, everything else is secondary, and you try and make a buck off of it. Okay? They have been willing to pay for players. They've paid the luxury tax. That's what they've done. This is not about that. Now, is the second apron and the repeater tax an element? Is it a, hey, by the way, we can also get out of the repeater tax? Yes, because nobody wants to pay it. But if you want a sign of how severe this is, the Los Angeles Clippers with Steve Ballmer, who I believe is like the paragon of a willingness to spend to compete, looked at their situation and via Ramona Shelburne of ESPN today, literally looked at the second apron and went, yeah, no, we can't re-sign Paul George. We can't keep this team together. Like, they're keeping Kawhi Leonard, who won't be there when they need him, and James Harden, who will probably not be good enough when they need him. And they let Paul George walk because of the second apron concern. So David wants to know, what are the things in the second apron? The first apron has some of the restrictions that the second apron does, right? Where you have to take back 100% of the matching salary. You can't trade somebody and then take on more salary than they were making if you're in these aprons. Now, if you're like, but the first apron is there too. Sure. But if you find yourself in a situation where you have to get there, you can at least reach it if you're not in the second apron. If you're in the second apron on this KCP deal, you're not even going to be able to get there. You're like, okay, they can't get buyout guys. Those guys haven't come. Those guys also haven't come because the Nuggets haven't needed them. This has been my recurring belief. Is my biggest thing when I looked at this is, if things go sideways, you do not have options. And everybody's like, if somebody gets hurt, they're screwed anyway. That's not true. If Aaron Gordon suffers an injury, God forbid, and is out 2 months, and you got to get by 2 months. If you would sign KCP, there's no alternative. They don't have a power forward to put in there. I guess Flacco and Zeke? I guess. They don't have a realistic option. You would be unable to add these players. You would be unable to pursue options to improve the team. If something changes with the team over the next 13 months, and I'm talking about stuff like agendas, chemistry, severe injury, major changes in life. These things happen to every single NBA team, and you have to be able to maneuver around them. They can't do that if they're in the second apron. Now, if you look at all that and you still say, I don't care, this was the best starting five in basketball, they should have just gone for it and hoped it worked out, I'm fine with that. But understand what you're saying. Don't say it's because they're cheap. Understand why they did this. Now, if you want to say they have too much belief in Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Julian Strother, and Holmes, I think you're right. I think this front office is too confident in that. But that's the reason that they're here. Not because they're cheap, not because they're not willing to spend, but because of those specific factors. Understand what you're saying and the realities of it before you enter into the conversation is all I'm asking. You have a right to be pissed. The Denver Nuggets are worse. They're way worse than they were 2 years ago. Way worse. And that's a huge problem. Swipe is right. They got to find some ways to improve. And I don't think that those are out there. We'll talk about some of those. But Swipe, that's where I'm at on this, is at least understand the position that you're taking and why. It's okay if you say, I understand that the second apron is super prohibitive. I'm willing to take that chance. But you need to recognize how screwed you would be if you need to make deals and change the roster after making that decision, and how then everyone be like, why don't they have flexibility? Terrible job by this front office. This is this is not the conundrum the Nuggets are in. This is the conundrum every single team is going to be in, Swipa.
Yeah. And I can get that, but there's a comment been made. Why did the Reggie get salary dumped? Irrelevant to the second apron. So again, just two different parts. The first part is, I would say that with all that in mind, Matt, is that even if they were going to head in that direction to avoid the second apron because they saw that catastrophic bill coming on the other end, the one the Boston Celtics are going to see a few years from now, the other side of that is, if that's the case, Calvin Booth, adding Reggie Jackson for a 2-year, $10 million deal with a player option, and then adding Zeke Naji, Matt, to a 4-year, $32 million deal makes no sense. Yep. Because if you're going based upon the youth movement and to also save money so that you don't get into the first or second apron and you have flexibility, then there are some things that need to happen. You need to sign players that are true assets. Reggie and Zeke do not qualify as that. And you also have to have draft picks available to be able to attach to said assets if you do want to upgrade your roster. And they didn't do that Because instead of that, now again, they gave up 3 seconds for Deron Holmes. I think that's the right move for what they're trying to get in value at the 22 overall pick. But to give 3 second-round picks away to get rid of a $5 million contract, that's what I'm saying. If they're going to commit to the youth and flexibility movement, that has to be across the board.
Okay.
And it might, and again, they maybe needed some tradable contracts. That could definitely be a part of it. But that part right there, at least from my side of things, seems to be slightly mismanaged in terms of the overall goal.
On the other side, I want to talk about some of the other things that led to this, which is like largely, if you're going to ask me what the number one thing that led to this situation, it's MPJ, and that's not even his fault. We'll talk about why. Plus, we'll get into some of the dynamics on why I'm not necessarily stressing about the second rounders. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Nuggets. Had a good day betting WNBA yesterday. I've got a full slate fired up today. There's so many ways to bet it. I love Angel Reese for Rookie of the Year. It's probably not going to cash, but it's going to be one of those like, ooh, look how close you got kind of bets. MVP market is really great. You've already got division odds for NBA up. If you want to fade your Nuggets out of frustration, great opportunity to do it. The Oklahoma City Thunder, who I think have had an absolute dynamite offseason in just about a week. Man, Sam Presti's an absolute monster. All this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us, making us part of your day. The original sin was not a sin at the time. The original sin was the MPJ contract. Okay. And if you want to say like a guy with back issues should not have gotten a max contract, you should have negotiated harder. Okay. I'm willing to listen to that. But the problem here is basically that because MPJ is a large money contract, a fourth large money contract on this team with his history of back issues, it makes it very prohibitive. Like that's like the original problem here. You can honestly build around Nikola, Jamal, Aaron pretty well. The issue is really that MPJ makes all of this that much tougher. At the same time, need to stress this, Michael Porter Jr. played a huge part in them winning their first and only NBA title. Like MPJ had a bad series versus the Wolves, and he had a bad series versus the Heat in the finals. Of the 6 series that they've played with this contending group, the last 2 years, MPJ's been good in 4 of them. It's pretty good. Okay. MPJ's still a very good player, has committed a lot, but that contract is really a big issue here. And if you really want to say like they needed to be able to upgrade the team, I'm open to that because like one of the things I probably would have looked at as more drastic changes has been like, we don't want to go in the second apron, but we got to improve the team, which means we got to break up the big 4. Like we have to find a way to move that. I would have looked at options. I would have looked at every option except trading Jokic. I would have looked at Jamal and I would have looked at Aaron. And I definitely would have looked at Jamal very closely before giving him a max contract. That would have been my thought on the subject. But like breaking up that team would have been really heartbreaking and really tough. And that would have been seen as like, why did you break up a contending team? But you could have broken them into smaller pieces to provide yourself with more flexibility. The second rounders thing, I'll just say this. I just always kind of feel like you can get them. Do I think that you can trade Zignaji for them? No. But if you really get into a bind and you got to trade one of the young pieces, like say you get to a point where you're like, man, we got to do something. Like we're out of options. We got to trade Peyton Watson. He looks like he's got star potential and we don't have a space for him and we need the assets. I think Calvin Booth would be like, over my dead body, you're going to have to peel that contract out of my hands with a crowbar. But if you get to that point, you could probably trade him for multiple, like an asset and then like second rounders. Like I feel like you can replenish those things. Swipe is why I don't necessarily stress about the second rounders.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that concept, but you still need to have things that you can attach. And I think draft picks, regardless, are always a commodity. That's why the Suns needed them. And again, the Suns needed them because they didn't have them, because they shifted out majority of their picks. So I think in maneuvering, it's always good to have as much flexibility as possible. It's the same thing when you want to liquidate your real assets in real life. You just want to have some things that are movable to assist you in making improvements or buying more property should you try to do so. And I think in this estimation, I think that the fact that they had to trade those picks with Reggie Jackson's contract in particular given he was the oldest rotation player on the team, and it was just $5 million, that for me is what's mostly kind of problematic in all this. And so I think some of this is, I would say this about MPJ. I think the MPJ contract at the time, because of the back injury, definitely understand. But again, the year that he got that contract, when he came off of it, he was the second best player on the team. He went that, I think it was a 20-game stretch basically without Jamal, where he was averaging like 23 and 7 on like 50, 80 splits. He was going insane. And he also had been getting healthier. And then obviously he has the back injury literally right after he signs the contract. And then he goes into the 2022, 2023 year, has a great year, plays really well, plays well majority of the playoffs. And then this year, he played really well. I mean, he played 81 games this year. He goes in the first round, averages 23 points a game, basically on like a 69, 68 true shooting. And he was a part of the reason why they were able to put away the Lakers when Jamal was struggling, and then obviously doesn't have a great series versus the Wolves. So I do think that contract has hindered them to a degree. But again, there are probably options available to them should they try to move off it. I don't know what those are. I don't want to speculate. There are probably some options that they do have in front of them. But I think that even with all that, they be understood, there still, for me, has to be a conscious philosophical adjustment. Doesn't mean to be a wholesale change, but adjustment with how they are approaching building this team. In part because if you're going to say we're going to put young players on the roster to make sure we're mitigating cost, well, those players need to be good, Matt. Those players need to be playable, playoff caliber players. And you typically don't find them at 21, 29, 30, 32, 37. Am I tripping? Am I tripping on when I say that? So that's what I'm saying.
This is why I talked about moving up in the draft. And if you want to see like a good example of a team doing that, about being like, hey, we're in contending position and everyone thinks this draft sucks, why don't we take a shot here? The Minnesota Timberwolves.
Rob Dillingham.
Like that player that could absolutely whiff. They could afford to whiff there.
Yeah.
Like that's totally fine. With the Nuggets, I am kind of this opinion where it's like, okay, go find somebody that's like higher and then go after that guy. Fernando says, Matt, can you explain the Pickett issue? Is it just projection, or why is there so much importance placed on developing an old second-round pick? Look, the front office has its guys. The one thing I will tell you is the front office really believes that it has the guys. Like it more so than almost any executive I've talked to. This front office believes that Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, by the way, ownership is in line with Christian Brown. They love Christian Brown. Jalen Pickett, Julian Strawther, Holmes. They genuinely believe in those guys' ability to be great NBA players. Now, I am just, this is, for years I have battled people on the young guys versus the old guys. And it's really funny to see this now with the fan base being like, where are we need veterans. This is the whole thing is like, I just feel that young players are unpredictable and that there's a wide range that they can turn out as. By 25, 26, you know who guys are, and you can kind of be like, I know what I can get from him. I know what I can't get from him. Julian Strawther could be incredible next year. He could not be an NBA player. Jalen Pickett could be an absolute revelation. He could not be an NBA player. And that variance to me is like, now I don't have a scout's eye either, right? Like that's why the front office gets paid what it does and I get paid what I do. But like that's to me is kind of like the relationship here. The Zeke extension was signed last October. The thing here is, the front office positioned itself as this is the plan, this is the plan, this is the plan. And that's where the tension comes through with the front office and the coaching staff, where Zeke didn't really get an opportunity until midway through the year. And then Zeke played well. Like Zeke and Vlatko were doing pretty well. That was the year before. Zeke was doing pretty well. Like there was those moments of like, hey, Zeke's actually like working his way into the rotation. And then the Dallas game happened. And nothing was the same after the Dallas game. Nothing was the same. And so like that to me is like where this comes out is the front office feels like we invested in these guys who you will not play. And now they have no value for us to even trade because no one thinks that they're any good because you haven't played them. And from Malone's end, it's, do you want to win a championship or do you want me to play the guys that are worse? And putting him in that dilemma is extremely difficult. And front offices always believe that coaches should be able to do both. Like, you should be able to do both. I gave you Nikola Jokic. You should be able to win enough games and develop these guys. But for Michael Malone, battling every night in the NBA, every game feels life or death. I don't think either side is necessarily wrong on it. I'm trying to explain where that comes from. And if you want to come down on, he should not have believed in Zeke, he's not good. He should not believe in Pickett, he's not good. He should not believe in Strother, he's not good. Okay, I think that that's totally fair, but that's where the criticism needs to start and stay, is that kind of assessment. And I'm very important on, there's lots of reasons for Nuggets fans to be mad, but we just got to be accurate about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a strategy, you have a thing that you're trying to accomplish, a goal you're trying to accomplish. But I am just not of the mindset that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it at the highest statistical probability possible. So if I'm making the youth movement, we're going to make sure we get the quality assets at the top or near the top of the draft as often as possible. Even with the Houston Rockets, you just put a tweet out there, Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson, Reed Shepherd, Cam Whitmore. They're loaded and they're taking chance after chance at the very top of the draft, whereas the Nuggets just philosophically are on the other end of that, where they're trying to do the same thing, but they're just saying that, well, we can just accumulate those young assets at the back of the draft. And again, Jalen Pickett, maybe he does work, maybe he doesn't. But I think the variance in what you're talking about of Nikola Jokic is 29 years old. He wants to win more titles. His ability to win a title is going to be tied to Jalen Pickett's ability to become a true backup point guard in year 2. That's a lot.
Yep.
That's too much in my estimation.
Which is why we're going to see Russell Westbrook in a Nuggets uniform. We'll talk about the upside of that decision if it comes to fruition. Plus, we'll talk a little bit more about, I'm going to try and end this with some optimism for you about not going too far down the panic road. You can go a little ways, just not too far. We'll do that next here on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. My favorite thing, Swipa, is everyone's got something that they want to harp on. Like, the agendas are what's really funny. And it happens with both Nuggets media and it happens in the fans and like there's this whole interconnectedness where it's like, no, it's Jamal's fault for not being better. No, it's Malone's fault for not playing the young guys. No, it's the front office. Like, everybody's got an agenda. And I'm sitting here.
What's your agenda, Matt? What do you think yours is?
I defend Malone a lot. But like, I'm not Malone's guy. Malone's not texting me, like, I don't have a relationship with Michael. My thing is more of like, everybody's got to be on the same page, man, and pulling together.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's got to be held accountable to each other. Like, and that includes Nikola, who gassed out in the third quarter of Game 7. And that was a big reason they blew the 20-point lead. Jamal being awful doesn't change the fact that Nikola was on the floor as the best player in the world. And they blew a 20-point lead in Game 7 at home. And Nikola doing that doesn't excuse that the front office bet big on Zeke Naji, and it's now a onerous problem of a contract. And the front office doing that doesn't change the fact that Peyton Watson was removed from the rotation in the back half of the year after I thought he was way better than Christian Brown the entirety of the year. Like, they're a team. It's a team. And everybody's it's all interconnected here. So Russell Westbrook's probably going to wind up a Denver Nugget. Now, the problem I will say is, look, the longer this goes, the longer there's a chance of some team being like, hey, we'll actually give you assets for him. We actually kind of want him. And the Clippers just moving him. Now, there's been kind of like an understanding of what's going to happen is the Clippers are going to find somebody to take him. They're going to buy him out, and then he's going to sign with Denver. Harrison Wind has reported this, and like, I will just tell you, I've heard the same, that Nikola Jokic is very much in the Russell Westbrook camp. He's always loved Russ. Like, he loves Russ. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Russ, I will also say this, the person that Russ is with the media and all the time that he spends barking at opposing fans is not the guy that he is behind closed doors. Teammates to a man vouch for him.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere he has gone, he has been beloved. NBA players love Russell Westbrook.
Mm-hmm.
I have concerns on a number of levels. I see the fit as a secondary ball handler. I just also, like, for me, it's more of like, I'm going to have to deal with the bad nights on here. I'm going to have to deal with people being like, why did Russ take that shot? Why did Russ take 8? Why did Russ take 16 shots? What was Russ thinking? We've got to move Russ. Why did we sign? Like, there's going to be those nights. There'll be good nights and bad nights. Russ gives more defensively than he ever has. So that's like,
yeah, that's a fact.
How we'll talk about like what else they got to do, but what is your level of optimism about Russell Westbrook joining the Nuggets?
Well, I said last year Russell Westbrook should have been the backup point guard of this team because, and tell me if you think this is untrue. I think among all backup point guards you could possibly nab, he is the closest facsimile to Bruce Brown, the closest you can find among backup point guards. You think that's a stretch?
Say that again.
Russell Westbrook is the closest facsimile to what Bruce Brown was for the Nuggets among backup point guards you could find, like on the cheap. I mean, maybe Dennis Smith Jr.
Yeah, I would go Dennis Smith Jr., but yeah, I see the approximation, yes.
Right. So you need a rim finisher. You need somebody who can penetrate. You need someone who's really good in transition. And Russell Westbrook, for all his faults, still a terrific passer. And Russ will engage defensively, i.e. the Phoenix Suns series 2 playoffs ago when he had to lock up Devin Booker, and he did. So Russ is going to play with maximum effort. And just to be honest with you, the Nuggets don't have a lot of players that are just flying around with the hair on fire all of the time. And Russ is always like that. And again, it's going to be to the detriment of time, but it wasn't Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown made mistakes, and Bruce Brown lost his minutes in the regular season. And then in the playoffs, he played a different lineup, and he took off. And I think that he would give them a true secondary playmaker that would allow for Jamal Murray to truly play off ball. And if you want to talk about someone taking advantage of space and finding open passing lanes, that's Russ. Russ is not going to be a positive shooter. If Russell Westbrook shot 33 or 32% from 3, that would be a screaming from the high heavens, a glorious thank you. He's not that kind of a shooter, but he's very good at what he's supposed to do, and he gives way more effort defensively than a lot of guards do around the league. And he's also still 6'3.5" and a very good rangy athlete. And putting that next to Nikola Jokic, I think would be very helpful. And especially Jamal Murray, y'all, if he sits out next year for 20 games and you start Russ for 20 or 15 games next year, again, that's just going to be, I think, a net positive next to Joker. We're going to have our moments for sure, but I think it's going to be a net positive personally. And again, I'm a little bit different on Russ than a lot of people. I'm not like a Russ stan. That's not like my guy, but I think overall as an individual player, there are things that he brings to the table that are really valuable for minimum money.
So Russ was really good defensively from when he was drafted 2008 through about 2012. In 2013, because the offensive load became so much, that's when he started to kind of slide. This is part of the reason I'm worried actually about Joker is like starting last year, I've started to see I just think Joker's cutting corners defensively. All the metrics are still good for him, but he's cutting corners a little bit because you have to save your energy. But Russ now, because he's in a lower usage role, like last year, it was really great to see. Like he really committed on defense, and he's so physical and athletic still. Even at this diminished point, like Russ is still so physical and athletic. That can be a real benefit. My problem here is when we look at the overall stuff, like, oh, Russell Westbrook's going to start for the Denver Nuggets when Jamal Murray's out. That's not bad. I'm like, okay, they could probably manage that. But this is where the problem of KCP comes in. Because now it's not just Russ, it's Russ and Christian. And I'm sorry, guys. Yeah. I posted this on Twitter. Christian had 4 months of over 40%, 3 months of under 30% from 3. Like, I don't know what to expect from him from 3-point range. Okay. The other shows that you're going to listen to, which we support and love on DMVR and Pickaxe and Roll, are very, very positive on what Christian's going to bring. I'm going to be the lone skeptic here. It's not that I don't think Christian's good. I want to be very clear on this. I think Christian just needs another year. I do not see like Christian with his inconsistency driving, understanding reads, and how he gets out of control and has to make decisions in midair a lot of the time. I worry about that in the starter versus starter minutes. The Jokic and Christian minutes were awesome because it was end of first quarter, end of third quarter versus staggered lineups. I worry about him having to execute at this level. And boy, if you're on the road versus the Clippers, who are going to be worse this year without Paul George, but you're on the road versus the Clippers on a Friday night and you're starting Russell Westbrook and Christian Brown, you need to win that game with defense. That's tough, man. That's just really tough. And so, like, I worry a lot about that. And so,
what do you think happens to their defense next year, by the way? Do you think it actually slides? Statistically?
No, because like I do think Christian is as good of a defender as KCP was last year overall. And like I thought KCP was all defense worthy. I think Christian's impact defensively will be as good, even if his technique isn't as good. Right. The offense is the point where I'm extremely worried. I've talked about how like I'm worried about this team's level of offensive explosiveness. Like that's to me is that's where this team's gotten so much worse. Is like 2 years ago they had so much offensive explosiveness, and Bruce and Jeff, quite honestly, because some of those minutes like you had at least Jeff's athleticism pop, and then losing KCP, I'm just like, man, I'm really worried about the explosiveness of this unit, and Russ doesn't help that.
If they got Reggie Bullock, do you think that would be a good assistance for them?
Oh boy,
just an additional floor spacer.
Oh boy,
which is the name on the market.
I like Reggie a lot. And I think that he's like Justin Holiday, a guy that when he plays here would be like, oh man, like this is how basketball is supposed to be played. But at the same time, like he's just fallen off so hard.
Yeah,
like I think he pushed himself really hard physically, and I think that's been like a big, a big pullback. Look. The other thing I would say, I do want to talk a little bit about the optimism here because I think it's important. You have Nikola Jokic, okay, who, despite things I have written, is still the best player in the world. You have Jamal Murray, who needs to be better, but ain't bad as a number 2. Aaron, I'm really worried about just because Aaron's been through a lot. Like Aaron's he's suffered such an extreme family tragedy. And like, I want to give Aaron as much space as possible to deal with that. But Aaron's still going to be really good as a professional basketball player next season. I think Peyton Watson has so much pop. Like, I'm just like, I'm all in on him. I think he has shown so much more capability. I would rather he start, to be perfectly honest with you.
You said rather him start?
Yeah, I'd rather he start 2 guard.
Then at the 2?
Yep.
So you're on this train with me that he's really a 2 in the future, a 2-3.
Yes.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Yeah. You're still going to be really good. Yeah. You can think that Jamal's not good enough for your person that you're only invested in, Nikola Jokic, and that's fine. He's still very good. You can think the team around Nikola isn't good enough for what he deserves, which is like 5 All-Stars. They're still good enough. And they're going to be there at the end. And the other thing I would say is I've been like, look, I still think you need to be a top 3 seed to win a title. The Mavericks made the finals and didn't win and were outclassed as a 5 seed. I still think you need to be a top 3 seed to win the title. Yeah. There's a lot of ways that Denver winds up with the top 3 seed and is still in that conversation, or winds up tied as a 4 seed. Like they lose by a half game on tiebreaker.
Well, they just don't play their starters as much. They lose 3 more games.
Which is what they should have done last year. There's all of these pathways to where Denver is still in the mix, and then they get the right series of matchups like the Celtics did, like the Mavericks did. And all of a sudden they're in the Western Conference Finals and they're in the finals, and everyone has shut up about all the things that they are certain of, including us, about how bad this has been. Like there are all these pathways. One of the good things with the young guys, and especially with it being CB and Peyton and Strother and Holmes and Pickett, those 5, you get 2 of those guys to pop.
Pop,
and this looks a lot better. Like it just does.
What do you think? So just realistically, so let's say CB starting. What is a realistic like Peyton Watson improvement to where it's like oh damn, they're still the top of the class in the West?
Oh boy, I think he's gonna have to that would mean that he has evolved to being a not consistent, but like there are nights when he's a 3-level scorer. When it's like, man, he killed them from all over the floor. He got to the rim. He hit pull-up jumpers off of the pick. He hit spot-up threes. Like that versatility, I think, is what it really takes. Because like that second unit is just going to need offense.
Right.
It just is. It's just going to need offense, and there's no good solution for it right now with where the roster's at. And I don't think Russ is going to be the guy that carries it, because Russ isn't there anymore. And honestly, my biggest criticism of him in 2017, when I had him second on MVP, is I was like, look, guys, he's done all of these things on the offensive end, and the Thunder's offense is still in the toilet. It wasn't good. When he was MVP level, that's who he was. It's been 7 years since then. So, I really worry about the offense. Jocelyn's in here dumping on Malone because, again, everybody's got their own agenda. And I'll just say this, look, Michael Malone has outpaced the win total that's been set for the team every single season.
Yeah.
They have made the playoffs every year since 2019, even when they missed 2 starters.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to win games, guys. I don't know. No.
Your total's going to be at 49, and they're probably going to go over 5.
Yeah. That, and that's the whole thing. But if you also ask me, what about the West? Dallas is better than them. Minnesota's better than them. OKC's better than them.
I'd be curious to see about that Dallas part. I think OKC for sure on paper should be the favorite out of the West right now. Yeah, we'll see. It's gonna be curious. I mean, I think the Nuggets, I've said this already, I think there are 1 or 2 players for being portable versus any opponent. That's what's at stake. I think winning 54 games is all on the table, but that's regular season. But playoff matchups, having different lineups you can play, different ways you can attack teams. That's why they were so deadly in 2022-23. And I think they're going to need at least 1 or 2 players to get back to that. And maybe Westbrook's the first one, and then apparently maybe Dario Saric or something be the last one. So
why do you hate the Saric idea so much?
I don't think he fits on this roster. I think if you're going to have a big on this team, I think Vlaco will be enough of approximation for what you'll get from Saric. A spacer, somebody who's athletic enough and big enough to play the 4, but in terms of his defensive ability, he doesn't move his feet enough. He's not a vertical spacer. There's nothing that he can do next to Joker that's going to help him at all defensively. And again, he can be a spacer, maybe next to Holmes or Zeke or whatever else it is, but that's it. He doesn't really have any defensive capability that this team actually needs. I think Vlaco fits that better than what Saric does.
What sucks here is I agree with you, but it's he used to be that.
Years ago, he was great.
Not years ago. We're talking
2 years ago.
We're talking about 2021. Saric in the year that the Suns went to the finals, if they'd had him, it would have been massive because they could have gone to that small ball unit.
Mm-hmm.
But he had an ACL over the age of 30.
Yeah.
That's what happens, man. Here's the other thing I will tell you, kind of wrap up with this. If this is as bad as everybody kind of thinks it is, it's inevitable that change will happen. It's just inevitable. It's either going to be roster changes, front office changes, coaching changes, or some combination of the 3. And that's normal for any organization. People move on. That's just how this kind of goes. But I will just say, you do need to remember why you're a Nuggets fan, and you need to try and remember that it's more important that the team succeed than you be right. And that's universally true. Just it's more important for me. It's more important for me to be accurate with how I talk about this team than it is for me to push an agenda. And those things I just think are really important with conversation. You get to be a fan, you get to be emotional, but you still want your team to do well. Don't root against the team just so you can be right about what it is that they screwed up.
So you mean don't do what you do with the Denver Broncos every time they do something at all? And then tweet me at it if I'm slightly off about one of my predictions going into the season. Something like that.
A lot of optimism again about this Broncos team. A lot of optimism. Sean Payton. How are you going to bet against Sean Payton? Well, he's not in New Orleans anymore. We'll see what happens. That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Adam and I'll be back tomorrow on World's Finest. Hopefully we'll have a Westbrook deal or something else to talk about. If not, we'll continue this conversation as well as Adam and I are good about coming up with different angles. So we'll talk about some stuff tomorrow. Leave us some notes in the comments on what you think the Denver Nuggets need to do on YouTube or in the 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.